Hey everyone, Mike Boone out here in Boston at the IACP conference. We have had a great time out here networking with everyone, getting to know mostly the city of Boston, the Boston police officers out here. I can't tell you how fantastic it has been, so thank you all for that. The conference, amazing. There are so many vendors here, so much experience walking around this building. The chiefs have been amazing, great host, great everything out here. So from us at Blue to Gold, we want to extend a great and welcome thank you so much for that. We appreciate you and everything that you all do for us. What we're going to do now is we've been hosting here at our Blue to Gold booth, and you can see a little bit behind me here. We've got the neon sign, we've got the desk, we've got the TV going here. It's basically like a little Blue to Gold living room we've got going on here right at the front entrance of this conference. And we've just been meeting people from all over the country. There you go, you can see, there's Aaron, we've got the couches, and everybody just stopping by here. Fantastic, and it's amazing to meet some of the folks that we get to talk with on the Search Seizure show. They come by and say hi. We've been giving out books, information, resources, stickers, because when you go to these conventions, you got to have stuff to give out for sure, and that we've been doing. Great time. Oh, look at that.
I want to say hi real quick. Hey guys, we're live, obviously, IACP. Mike Boone's going to be doing sessions. We're going to be doing several sessions today, so if you guys are interested and have some time in your hands, watch us live.
You guys seen that guy before, right? There we go. So yes, we've been hosting these like in-person short little webinars right here in the Blue to Gold living room. It's been a great time. Everybody's hanging out, and again, can't express enough how much we've enjoyed this. So we're going to talk here a little bit right now about traffic stops and K9s, and we'll really just touch on a few things that when a sniff might become a search in there. There's a bunch of cases that have been seen. We'll lay some foundation here when we start these free air sniffs, right? And it all starts with good old Roy Caballas out there in Illinois. And he was stopped for a traffic violation. The officers had information that he's involved in some narcotics there. They did a free air sniff of Caballas's vehicle. And the dog alerted. They end up searching the car, and they do find marijuana and arrest Caballas. And his issue with the what was going on there is like, well, hang on a second here. I've got some expectations of privacy inside my vehicle, and I feel like my rights are violated. Well, the courts looked at this and said, hey, hang on a second here. What actually took place? What actually took place in the stop when they ran the dog? Well, the dog walked around the exterior of the vehicle. They had reasonable suspicion, so there's no Rodriguez issues here. We'll talk about extending the stops in some of our other classes, but there was no extension of the stop concerns in this. They run the dog around the exterior of the vehicle. The dog alerts and gives us our probable cause to search that vehicle. There was no, as we'll talk about a case here in a second, there was no Jones search that took place. There was no touching of that vehicle, that protected area, with that intent to gather information. And the courts also kind of looked at this, a CATS analysis. Well, did we violate Caballas's expectation of privacy? Well, the dog did nothing more than smell the air outside the vehicle and alerted to a substance that he wasn't allowed to possess. So the court said that a search did not take place. And there's good old Roy Caballas right here. So here's what the court said. A dog sniff conducted during a lawful traffic stop that reveals no information other than a substance that no individual has any right to possess does not violate the Fourth Amendment. So no search, no violation of the Fourth Amendment, evidence upheld on that case. So what we're really kind of, when we dive into this one here, is when this K9 search potentially becomes a search. We're talking about intentional pre-alert touching of these vehicles. And this is where the argument started. This is where before, like, well, come on, we talk about chalking tires or a dog putting his paws on the car. It didn't really seem like a reasonable argument out there until enters one Antoine Jones. Antoine Jones lived in the Washington, D.C. area, and he was had a nightclub, couple of nightclubs, and was being investigated by the government for being involved in narcotics trafficking. Well, they get a search warrant to put a GPS tracker on his wife's Jeep. Murphy's Law. They had 10 days to put this tracker on. Of course they can't find it. Go looking around. 11th day, the cops find it, and they're like, no, our warrant's expired, but hang on a second. Do we even need this warrant? Do we even need this warrant to put this tracker on? Because we're doing nothing more than finding out where his car goes. And if we had the time, the resources, the ability to do so, well, we could just do this. We could follow him around 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and gather the same information. So they decide, you know what? They go up underneath that car. And for those of you that have ever put on one of those GPS trackers with those magnets, how loud it is when you do it. 2 o'clock in the morning, you know, you're underneath that car, and boom, that thing hits that metal frame, and I swear you can hear it from a mile away. But they put the tracker on his vehicle. They end up getting the GPS information. Something like 70,000 data points come through, and they ultimately develop probable cause to get a search warrant to search his house, the nightclub, and they arrest Caballos something like 100 kilos of cocaine and $1 million in cash. Good hit. Well, this is where we go. We go to the Supreme Court on this, and there's Mr. Antoine Jones right there. I won't get it deep into the story, but his travels through the court system is quite amazing. Ultimately, he represents himself and gets himself a pretty dang good deal on the back end for having all this dope. Well, the analysis starts out as, well, did he have an expectation of privacy in where he travels out in public? Not so much. But what did the government do? Did the government touch a protected area, his Jeep, with the intent to gather information? That became the analysis of Jones here. So there's two requirements that come in this here. Did the police touch or enter a protected area? And did they have the intent to gather information? And absolutely. We touched it, and we wanted to know where this Jeep was going as it traveled around town. So there becomes your Jones search, touching with the intent to gather information. Jennifer Lynn Richmond here. This took place down in Texas, and a trooper, Manny Gonzalez, was driving behind her, and it's got this wobbling tire going on as he's driving down the road. Well, from what I understand, he's one of the best interdiction troopers down there in Texas. And granted, he sees this vehicle, I think he runs it. It was recently registered, recently had a border crossing, but he stops it for this probable cause. Well, he makes contact with Jennifer, and she's got some of those indicators, abnormally nervous, story didn't quite match up with where she was going. And so Trooper Gonzalez is, got at least himself some reasonable suspicion here. And as Jennifer's getting out of the car, he decides to push on that wobbling tire, and thud. Well, that's not what happens to a tire that's full of air. That's what happens to a tire that's loaded down with something. So they ended up taking the car back to the shop. They put it up on the rack, and they pull the tires out there. There's all the tires in there. That's all the dope that was recovered from inside there. But the issue becomes this: when Trooper Gonzalez pushed on that tire, was that a search? And if you think about Jones, did he touch that tire with the intent to gather information? And the answer is yes. Some of the lower courts said, you know what? Hey, we don't, we kind of joke around here at Blue to Gold here, is going through the courts through Texas. One of the judges was like, ma'am, we don't recognize a privacy interest in the air in your tires. And they didn't really recognize it as a search until you get this Jones argument in there. So interestingly enough, Jennifer, she won that initial battle on the lower courts, but as we go up higher in the courts here, ultimately she loses. Why? Because the trooper touched the tire that was the equipment issue, the malfunction issue. There's a safety concern or aspect to touching that tire, and if he touched any one of those other three tires, I think we have a different outcome. So the trooper touched it with the intent to gather information, yes, but for traffic-related issues. Also, this took place here, Taylor versus Saginaw, chalking of tires. I'm sure some of you have heard this thinking, what do you mean? Is that a search? Well, think about it. Is the government touching that tire? So think about it. They put the little chalk mark on your tire to see how long you've been there. They come back a little bit later on, and boom, did you leave or not? Well, is that a touch of a protected area? Yes. Were we trying to gather information? Yes. So that's a search in the eyes of the courts. Now, it's gone through there. It was upheld as a search. Out in the Ninth Circuit, they're looking at this as an administrative type searching, and they've been good with it. But just really think about that. Touching with the intent to gather information by putting chalk on a tire kind of makes sense under that Jones aspect there. Chalking is a search for the Fourth Amendment purposes, as the district court aptly noted. Despite the low-tech nature of the investigative technique, the chalk marks clearly provided information to Hoskins. That was whose vehicle it was. Funny enough, I think she was in law school when she started learning this stuff, thinking, wait a second, that's happening to me. This practice amounts to an attempt to obtain information under Jones. There it is. They make the So essentially what's going on here, the guy just kind of hanging out in the parking lot here, a K9 officer comes up, makes contact with him, and ultimately ends up running his dog around the vehicle. And the question that comes up here is, under these circumstances, did the officer need reasonable suspicion to deploy the K9 around the car? And the answer is going to be yes. Right? We've got to have those RS, or, well, consent always works. You know, us at Blue to Gold here, we talk about crew, right? Do we have consent, a recognized exception, or a warrant? Well, in this case, the guy was real apprehensive. He's like, I don't really want you doing so. But he did it anyway. So do we need reasonable suspicion? Yes is going to be the answer for us to deploy around the car. But did we conduct a search? And that's the big question that we're going to talk about here is, did we conduct a search under the Fourth Amendment or a Kabbalah-style free air sniff in doing so? So we'll just watch this little part right here.
Let's go find out. Let's go find out. Find out. Zip. Check. Up. Good. Good boy.
So I've got a couple people hanging out right here, and my friend Sean over here, as soon as the K9 handler kind of directed his dog up, Sean said, ooh, right, Sean? Is that what's going on here? So that was the question here. Was this Kabbalah's? Now remember, in Kabbalah's, no touching. We walked around the exterior of the vehicle and the dog did the free air sniff. But think about this now. Are we directing that dog to put his paws on that car? Are we guiding him to do so? And you start looking at a Jones analysis in this, and I think the answer is going to be yes. A few other cases that we've had here, U.S. versus Thomas here, where the dogs are directing his canine, giving those guidance, directing his canine with his hand to go low to high on a truck bed. In response, the canine jumped up on and placed his paws on the vehicle and pressed his nose against the truck. And we'll talk about instinct versus being guided. And that's really a lot of the discussion that's coming up with these canine cases here. And here, it was instructed to do so. And the court said this: the government claims that is frivolous for Thomas to contend that the dog's contact with his truck was a Fourth Amendment violation or search. And then introduced Jones again. After Jones, his argument cannot be so easily dismissed. Now we're guiding, we're touching with the intent to gather information. And the courts are really looking at this Jones analysis through these canine cases. Thus, it is conceivable that by directing the drug dog to touch the truck in order to gather sensory information about what was inside, the officer searched the vehicle under the Fourth Amendment. Now, we'll talk about pre-alert here a little bit. This is before we have our probable cause. If we're touching that intent before we've got the PC to do so, that's going to be an issue. What if the dog touches the vehicle without handler direction? And that is the argument. Dogs are dogs. I'm sure you all have them, and you know what? Mine is not very well behaved. And there is an instinct. They're animals. Yes, we train them to do certain things here, but they still have instinctuality about them. And when we look at some of these cases, you know, dogs can touch vehicles if it's instinctual. Okay, that's just what they do. As long as it's not a foundation that they've been built on in training. Like if we're going through and part of our training, like every vehicle that doesn't even have narcotics inside of it, we're teaching them to jump up or we're teaching them to enter inside that vehicle. Well, that's not instinctual, that's trained. We're talking about solely instinctual behavior. And then touching or entering the vehicle is a change of behavior equaling PC. So we can, if if you handlers out there, you're like, okay, my dog gave, that final indicator, or he alerted that, you kind of think about that split second time. The alert was there. If you have your alert, now you have probable cause, now you have the automobile exception. But that's for you, your handlers out there to pay attention to know that, hey, this is what my dog signals when they've got my probable cause. And if it's that pre-alert and then that touch, we're fine. Just really pay attention to that. Low is the way to go. Okay, low is the way we want to go. Don't guide them. Don't direct them to stand up higher there. Case for U.S. versus Stone out of the 10th Circuit here. The driver opened the trunk to retrieve paperwork, and K9 instinctually jumped in and then alerted. No guidance, no direction by the handler. The dog just said, cool, we're going for a ride. I'm hopping in the trunk. So the courts are okay with this one, right? No Fourth Amendment violation occurred. During a free air sniff, the handler left the door open so the K9 could enter. A little bit different story here, but when we look at this, the court said encouraging a K9 to enter a vehicle is a Fourth Amendment search. We created a condition that will change those facts. That leaving that door open might encourage that dog, and the courts didn't like that. U.S. versus Harrell, 2016 case, and one more time, you got to appreciate these graphics here, the dog coming in here. This case here said, without prompting, the K9 stuck his head through the open car window door to smell for drugs. Said, not a search under the Fourth Amendment. Going back to instinctual. Going back to the instinctual aspect, no issues in at least that court. Handlers directing their K9 to climb onto or enter a vehicle pre-alert is a search, okay? Is a search and may result in suppression of evidence. Like I said before, pay attention to your dogs. If they're giving you those indicators and you're getting that alert, that probable cause, that changes the game. But be able to articulate that change in behavior that you're looking for. Instinctual touching is also problematic under Jones. So there's a case up, a few things going on up in Idaho. In this case study, a K9 instinctually entered an open window to sniff. This was done without PC or consent. And in this case, this was a search under the Fourth Amendment and evidence was suppressed. So there is some discussion out there about this instinctual jumping into windows up in Idaho. Like the marking of chalk on a car tire's tread, a dog's nose passing through that protected area, through the window, is a minimal interference with property. But the right to exclude others from one's property is a fundamental tenet of property law. That's the protections the Fourth Amendment gives us. And we see no room in the Jones test for a de minimis exception. A de minimis, a minimal, like it really doesn't affect your life, a minimal intrusion on your life. And this one, they didn't see an exception for this in here. Further, by simply adhering to the Jones test that is formulated, courts, law enforcement, and the public benefit from the clarity of a bright line rule for determining when a non-search exterior sniff becomes a search. Bright lines are tough to come by in our world of policing. And so this is the discussion that we're still having here. A drug K9 was directed to, and this is the most recent case, this Dorf case coming up out of Idaho. It was decided March 20th of 2023. Directed to touch the outside of a car during a free air sniff and alerted. Guidance, direction prior to that alert, and the court said this was a search under the Fourth Amendment and evidence was suppressed. Really got to take that into consideration, that guidance in that direction. In sum, a warrantless Fourth Amendment search occurred when Nero, that was the doggy there, trespassed against Dorf's vehicle for the purpose of obtaining information, and the handler, directed Nero up, guided him to touch there. Or related to the vehicle. The state has not argued that an exception to the warrant requirement applies. Accordingly, the district court erred when determined that Dorf's Fourth Amendment rights were not violated. So they're saying, hey, this guidance aspect here, this direction is going to be a search. And the Supreme Court decided not to hear it. So, sometimes you look at that, whether they don't want to take the case, maybe there's some agreements in there. So we'll see where this goes. But as for now, they didn't grant cert, so they're not taking a look at it. So the takeaway, Do your best to keep your dogs off the cars pre-alert, instinctual or guided otherwise. Look for those indicators that give you your probable cause. Know your dog. Be able to testify in court, say, these are the things that I look for, and these are the things that I've trained in. And on vehicles with nothing in them, this is our reaction. Or when there is test narcotics inside the car, these are the factors that I see, and this is my probable cause prior to any touching. Be able to prepare to talk about that in your cases here. So again, I hope you guys found this information useful, pretty quick, down and dirty, K9 talking about searches, but hopefully you can take that information and use it out there in the field. Again, I can't thank Boston enough for hosting this convention, having us out here at Blue to Gold. It's been a fantastic time. If you need us for any of our training, you saw Aaron out there, make sure you reach out to there. If you want Anthony or me or any of our great instructors to come out to you, please reach out to her on our website. Also, if our webinars, our online chats, I'm sure you've seen our Search and Seizure show. Pop on there, send us an email, or we'd love to have you all call in and chat with us. We love talking with you all out there. We appreciate everything you do out there. Thank you, Boston. Thank you, IACP. Everyone, be safe, take out there, and please, I hope we help you get this right every single time.